Hey, welcome to Brack, Box on the Box, Rock and Celluloid. I'm with Box, and today I'm going to look at the top 10 films of one of my favourite filmmakers, the Dutch auteur, Paul Verhoeven. So Paul Verhoeven is what we call a smuggler, to quote Martin Scorsese. Scorsese did a documentary about 20 years ago called Personal Journey, or Personal History of Cinema, something like that. And he used the term smuggler to describe directors, and particularly European immigrant directors into Hollywood, who smuggled in subversive ideas into the text of their films. And I think Verhoeven's like this, but his kind of ideas are more overt, his satire. A lot of Verhoeven films, there's no way, particularly his Hollywood films, you get away with what he was getting away with. There's no way people would back those kind of films with budgets now, but we'll kind of come to that. He's born in 1938. He grows up in the war. The war really shapes a lot of his memories, playing in the rubble and that. And famously, he went to see Vertigo kind of 25 times. Again, we'll come to that later on. Starts off in TV, short films, documentaries. His first film is called Business is Business, and then his breakout film is in 1973. But my number 10 choice, actually, before I do that, just a few that didn't make the cut, there's Elle from 2016. This was kind of a comeback for him. He hadn't done a film for 10 years. I tried to get into this film, but it felt like it was more Isabella Huppert's film. It felt like she was more the author of the film, so to speak. Interesting rape revenge film. Then there was his 1985, his first sort of British language film, American film, Flesh and Blood. This is the first Verhoeven film I saw. I was a big Rutger Hauer fan at the time, and went to the video shop. At that time, I was getting Wanted Dead or Alive out and A Breed Apart. Just anything with Rutger in, because I loved him in Blade Runner and Nighthawks. It's very bloody, very violent. It kind of tries to depict its era realistically. I just think some of the acting's a bit shabby on it. It was a big flop for him, but he came back stronger. But it's worth checking out. All Verhoeven films are worth checking out. And then Hollow Man. This was his last Hollywood film. I think this was an attempt to kind of deliver another hit movie. It grossed nearly $200 million on a $95 million budget. So it probably broke even once it went to DVD and TV and stuff like that. I think the problem with this film, it kind of descends into classic horror movie slasher tactics at the end. And he's kind of making sort of stuff going on about Plato at the time, what Plato said, if we're invisible, and I don't read Plato, but I think it lacks depth. I think at the end of the day, the Kevin Bacon character, as soon as he becomes invisible, he basically uses it to, stalk women and fondle their breasts and stuff like that when they can't see him. It's got that classic titillation in it. But the cast's pretty good. Quite interesting to see Josh Brolin on kind of Josh Brolin's second male romantic lead mould before. After this film, I think he would have quite a big break and come back in No Country for Old Men and basically, become the top character actor that he is. Just going to move the camera forward a bit there. So that's the ones that didn't make the cut. So coming in at number 10 is the film that's so bad it's brilliant, and it's Showgirls. So basically this had a $45 million budget, only grossed $37 million. If you did it today, a studio would be putting at least $80 million, possibly $100 million to make what is effectively almost a soft kind of porn exploitation film. I mean, you'd have to look at something like Deep Throat, where they're attempting to make an exploitation. Well, that's an exploitation film that made money, crossed over. I find it extraordinary in this film. I mean, some of the dialogue, the line about the lady with genital warts. You have to kind of scrub yourself clean after this film. It also contains a hilarious sex scene between Carl MacLachlan and Elizabeth Barkley in a swimming pool. Which is really unsexy. So if you've ever fantasized about having sex in a swimming pool and are still planning on doing it, don't watch this film, because this will put you off the pool sex scene. Gina Gershon's hilarious as the kind of bitchy lead. What I find hilarious is that these shows go on, and the erotic show is just so tacky. Who'd want to pay to see it? Who'd kind of think this stuff is good? The cinematography's kind of tacky. I think it's Jos Vacano, who he collaborates with a lot. It's just hilarious. I've seen it a couple of times, this film. I can't remember whether I saw it at the pictures. I think I maybe did. and then I watched it again on TV, and it is worth watching because it's so awful. Joe Esterhans, you know, was the highest paid screenwriter at the time. And you can imagine writing these dialogue and either going like, yeah, let's see if we can get this away with this one, or like, oh, this line's brilliant, we've got to have this in. But yeah, you've got to see this film. Okay, coming at number 9's his first big Dutch hit. It's Turkish Delight. This is a tragic love story with Rutger Hauer in his breakout film, and Monique van der Den, is it? Monique van der Ven, very beautiful Dutch actress. I think what's interesting about this film, it's got a lot of sex, and it's kind of got a lot of the sexual freedom that you imagine with Dutch culture. You know, obviously it has got relaxed drug laws. So a lot of nudity, very European. Back when I was younger, you had Red Triangle films on Channel 4, which were kind of like, oh, these films have lots of nudity and sex. And this is kind of like, you know, the kind of foreign language film that would come on Channel 4 in the 80s as a Red Triangle film. It's really good, worth checking out. And number 8 is another Dutch film. This is his last Dutch film before he went to Hollywood. This has Jan de Bont doing the cinematography, another key collaborator. Of course, Jan de Bont would go on to direct Speed and Twister, have great success, and then his next few films didn't do well, and then he's not directed again. But this is a psychological thriller. The main character, a bisexual novelist, played by Jerome Crabbe. So he was in the Bond film, The Living Daylights. He's in The Fugitive. He's in another Verhoeven film. So yeah, it's got some striking imagery in this. Obviously the guy's kind of having a psychotic episode. He kind of thinks he's been stalked or going to be murdered by a woman, I think. I've not seen it for a long time, but there's a striking bit where I think when his boyfriend gets killed, kind of steel pole used in building goes through the back of his head in a car accident, or maybe goes through the front actually. He crashes into something. He goes right through his eyeball and through the back of his head. You know, really visceral violence. Quite a lot of Catholic inspired imagery in this, and there's quite a few religious themes at times in Verhoeven's films. I think he's making a film about a lesbian nun at the moment as well, which sounds very Verhoeven. Fourth Man, this is another really, really good film. It's Dutch films from after Turkish Delight. He does something called sex comedy, called Kitsch Tipal, or maybe it's just a period film, erotic film. I haven't seen it, I must confess. But from Turkish Delight, I've not seen that one, but through to him going to Hollywood, his Dutch films are really good. And that brings me to number 7, which is Soldier of Orange. So this basically looks at the Nazi occupation of Holland, and how several friends react to that. Some join the Dutch resistance, some go out to war, some become collaborators. It's got Rutger Hauer, Jerome Crabbe in it. It's actually got Edward Fox in it. So there's obviously a point where it actually goes into English language, speaking in English. I think this was a huge hit at the time. The film won the Los Angeles Film Critics Association for Best Foreign Film, and it received a Golden Globe nomination. So yeah, this was a big film, and again got Verhoeven's reputation out more. It's a big scale war film, really good. Again, the last 3 films are well worth checking out. My favourite, of his initial period of Dutch films is Spetters. This comes in at number 6. I love this film. This is basically a motocross kind of, not teen film because the characters in it, they're kind of teenagers or early 20s, but they're drinking, smoking, shagging, girlfriends. Rutger Hauer's a kind of supporting part in this, is like the top motocross rider. It's got an actress in it called Renee Sujic. I can't pronounce it. She became quite did some work in Hollywood. But yeah, I really like this film. Basically, the plot is, this is the Wikipedia: 2 young motocross racers and their mechanic dream of fame, fortune, and casual sex. Their hero is the legendary motocross champion Gerrit Kamp, that's Rutger Hauer, who conspires their competitive rides. Their lives are changed when they meet a young seductress. There's actually one of the characters gets paralysed in an accident in this. I think it's on his bike. And later on, spoiler alert, he's in a wheelchair and he actually killed himself by wheeling his wheelchair out onto a kind of motorway in front of a truck. Again, it's just got that no holds barred approach. I think yeah, the actual actor who plays that character actually killed himself in real life. Apparently, he was very method, identified with his characters, and he had a lot of trouble, and he would kill himself in real life. Really sad. But yeah, this is a great film. It's got a bit where there's a male rape in it, where a motorcycle gang rapes one of the main characters, which is pretty hideous. But again, it just doesn't pull its punches. Well worth checking out. So I'm kind of debating here. I'm looking at my 4 and 5, and I'm thinking of changing this up. And I'm gonna. So coming at number 5. People might be shocked by this. I'm going to go for Basic Instinct. I think this is a really good Hitchcockian thriller. Again, sorry, my nose is itching. Obviously, it's a massive hit at the time. I'm just looking at box office gross. Jan de Bont does the cinematography, and this would lead him on to Speed. $353 million gross on a $49 million budget. This was the biggest box office hit of its year. If you released it, that'd be about $700 million, I guess. Probably doubling with inflation. Star-making role for Sharon Stone. I think she's great in this. I think she looks fantastic. Guys at my age, a lot of love for Sharon in Total Recall, a lot of love for her in this. She's doing the Hitchcockian blonde thing. There's the classic leg uncrossing scene. Allegedly, she wasn't wearing pants. Allegedly, she didn't know that the camera would be that low, but I guess if you're not going to wear pants, perhaps you should have guessed what Verhoeven was going to do. But I think that scene's interesting because it works on 2 levels. It's like you have the she's kind of controlling them. She's controlling the interrogation scene. There's a great kind of brilliantly shot. This scene's got great little pans across. There's a little whip pan. There's a great kind of zoom in on. I forget the big guy sweating. I forget the name of the actor. Really good. So she's kind of controlling the males in the scene, but then she's being offered up by the director as titillation for males in the audience, us watching. So in terms of kind of film theory, it's kind of working on 2 levels, and I think it's really, in the terms of the male gaze, as I would say, female perspective as well. So that's interesting. I think Michael Douglas is really, only Michael Douglas could play such a flawed character. He does it really well. Fatal Attraction, Wall Street, stuff like that. I think it keeps you guessing as well. I think it's well scripted. It's got that kind of dialogue. Gene Triplehorn's good. George DeZunda. Again, the violence when it happens is really shocking. I think the Jerry Goldsmith score's great, and there's that great opening scene with the Goldsmith score, giving it that sort of more mellow Bernard Herrmann style. Obviously, I mentioned before, I think Verhoeven, or if I didn't mention it, he saw Vertigo 25 times as a young man, and that's how these older directors learn how to make films. There was no such thing as a film school then. Verhoeven, I think, was born 1938, so when he made this film, he would be 54. So he's having big success later in life. But I really like this film. So just pipping it at number 4, I'm going for Black Book, which is his comeback Dutch film. This is really good. This was a really big hit for him. It got a BAFTA award for best film not in the English foreign language. It was 3 times more expensive than any Dutch film ever made. It was a huge hit. Klaas van Houten, really good in this season, Game of Thrones, and Sebastian Koch. So Sebastian Koch plays the good German in this. This is interesting. It's basically, again, it's kind of following the Soldier of Orange thing, about how the Nazi occupation affected Holland, but this is from a Jewish perspective, so she's from a Jewish family. The actual final scene, she's back in Israel. It's really good. It's got a lot of tension in it. It's really well scripted. It's epic. I'm just looking how long it is, 145 minutes. I remember going to see this at the Pictures. Actually, a little story about this. We have an art house cinema in Newcastle called Tyneside Cinema. And at this time, the Tyneside was having work done on it when this came out. So they temporarily moved the Tyneside over. I live over the water in Gates, a place called Gateshead, and there's an old town hall in Gateshead, and they temporarily moved the cinema to there. in a kind of make-do setup, and it was really good, quite good fun. And I actually saw this film down there, but it's very, very good film. Not seen it for a while, but I'll be really excited to see it again. It's tense, it's exciting, she's excellent. And it looks an interesting, a period of Dutch history that Verhoeven, covered. So that's my number 4 choice. In actual fact, the cinematographer in this is by Carl Walter Lindenlaub. I think he might be German. So not his usual collaborators on the cinematography. Okay, coming in at number 3, this is his breakout film. This is the film that basically gave him a Hollywood career, and it's RoboCop. So this grossed $53.4 million in 1987. If you released it now, it'd be looking at about $130 million gross, I guess. $13.7 million budget. Jos Vacano on cinematography. Basil Polidoris of Conan fame does a great score for this. This is really good. You got some kind of religious imagery in this. I mentioned about obviously the resurrection theme with the Peter Weller character. I think there's 2 levels on this. This is where the smuggler thing comes in. It's a scathing critique of Reagan corporate America. It's absolutely hilarious. There's the brilliant scene when they have the boardroom meeting and Ed 209 malfunctions. If you actually see the uncut scene of this, it's even more violent and even more funny. But there's the kiss-off line where, is it Daniel O'Hellery says, I'm just looking at the cast list there, says, Dick, I'm very disappointed. Brilliant. But if you actually look at it, you look at how the privatisation of the prison system in America and corporate security and things like that, it is very prescient. The whole RoboCop thing. Really good. Miguel Ferrer's great in this. Ronnie Cox, brilliant. Kurtwood Smith, Peter Weller's really good. Nancy Allen. It's quite interesting. It's got that credit sequence. It's just kind of black and white type. It's strange. Again, it's got a strange kind of slightly flat cinematography. But it's a really good film, big hit in its day. Even Barry Norman liked this film, even though he criticised the violence. He could see the value in it. I mean, the sequels are bollocks, and then the remake. I mean, this is only one worth its salt. Really well written, really funny. And just 102 minutes. Well worth checking out the uncut version. A really great, one of the key 80s films. I think if you're picking, your top 10, top 20 80s films, this is going to be in there. Certainly science fiction films is going to be very high with Terminator and Blade Runner. Really good. So this was nearly number 2, but it got pipped to the post by a film which just wouldn't get made now, although it's had lots of straight to DVD sequels, and that's Starship Troopers. This is equally hilarious. It's a satire on fascism, really. It's got brilliant special effects, brilliant. I mean, this was one of the gold standard CGI effects at the time. Brilliant work by Phil Tippett and ILM. Famously, Verhoeven, he's coming off the back of Basic Instincts, but Showgirls had been a flop. So he was lucky to get the money for this, but he famously did some, I think he might have used his own money or did some pre-testing on the effects, and he did a sort of video for executives. I want to make Starship Troopers, and there's great bits when he's directing this. So he's kind of, obviously the bugs aren't there, so he'll be with the actors. Yes, then the bug comes in and brilliant. If you've not seen Verhoeven interviewed, he's absolutely brilliant. He always wears a denim shirt. He's basically just wears denim trousers, jeans, and denim shirts, and he must just have 100 of them in his wardrobe. I love him. So this cost $105 million. It's saying in Wikipedia, it only grossed $121 million. I think the problem was that it lacked stars, really. I think to sell this, it needed a star to kind of get it over the hill. Now, if you'd had, say, like a young Leonardo DiCaprio, Keanu Reeves is probably getting a bit too old then. I'm not sure who else you could have cast. Maybe Ryan Felipe. I don't know, but he cast Casper Van Dien, Dina Mae, Denise Richards, Jake Busey. love Jane Boucher, but these are kind of TV actors. I mean, it's what it's basically like is Beverly Hills 90125 with massive space bugs and you know, quasi-fascist imagery. He takes the media elements of RoboCop in this and takes them further with the do you want to know more bits. But it's also about propaganda. You know, it's kind of like, who are the bad guys? Why are they the brain bugs on Planet P? Why are they the bad guys? You know, are they the bad guys? But it's got great action sequences, massive ultra violence. Michael Ironside's great. The dialogue's hilarious. You know, being in the mobile infantry made me the man I am today. Brilliant visual gag. Quite epic. You know, he's basically making a war film. He's kind of taking the Soldier of Orange thing. You've got the young people. Their homes being invaded, and they join the army, the resistance. You know, so it kind of ties in with that. It's based on a book by Robert A. Heinlein's 1959 novel. Obviously, I think Yes did a song called Starship Trooper. Yeah, I mean, some of the acting's not great, but that kind of adds to it. It's hilarious, you know, but it's really great. At the end of it, the effects are fantastic. It's got fantastic action sequences, and it's very funny, and that's my number 2 choice. So, going back through, number 10 was Showgirls, 9 Turkish Delight, 8 The Fourth Man, 7 Soldier of Orange, 6 Spetters, 5 Basic Instinct, 4 Black Book, 3 RoboCop, 2 Starship Troopers. I mean, Showgirls aside, these are all really good films, brilliant films, some of them. So number 1, you'll be probably guessed, is Total Recall. If I had to kind of define this film as a place in my life, this was the summer film of its time. So when I was first in my teens, really getting more into film, into not just watching, but in terms of looking at who does the cinematography, who's the actor, who's the director. You know, this started in my sort of 15, 16 years old. So by the time this came out, I was a big Schwarzenegger fan, loved Commando, loved Terminator. But this was Arnie, you know, it had a big hit with Twins, but this was Arnie ready to go up a notch. The feature on this in premiere was really about the budget. This was a $50-60 million budget done exclusively on big sets in Mexico. Now the sets can look a bit fake now, particularly the model work with the train going across Mars, but I kind of like that. This is in pre-CGI days. You've got animatronic effects by Rob Bottin. You've got sets. There is, I think, a computer bit where he goes through the X-ray thing. But I think the tagline on the poster on the trailer was "Prepare for the ride of your life," and it has a fantastic poster, just Arnie's big head, the pyramid. Pyramids of Mars, of course, if you know Doctor Who, and then he says they stole his mind, now he wants it back. I mean, that's great, you know, but what I think his achievement with this is, and what he does that subverts, is he does the thing where he recognises Arnie's strengths, his star persona, but he removes those. So when the film starts, Arnie's not Arnie, he's this kind of slightly put upon, not knowing what he's doing builder. And he's like, you know, he goes to recall, and after that he slowly becomes the Arnie. We know there's the bit where he has to fight with 4 guys and he breaks the guy's neck. He has to shoot out on the escalator and goes through the X-ray thing, and he becomes more Arnie as we go through. The one line is a great "See you at the party, Richter." Michael Ironside's in this, he's brilliant. Sharon Stone's fantastic. Rachel Ticontin's fantastic. Athletic, demure. Some of the effects are still really cool, but at its heart as well, I just think it's a great science fiction film. It's really cool, and I think the Philip K. Dick element of it, in amongst all the action, you know, is this reality or not? You know, he's kept going right to the end. There's still that question, you know, I mean, the "Kiss Me Before Wake Up's" cheesy at the end, but I love it. I love the alien, you know, the alien technology. The mine recalls Forbidden Planet. There's a nice reference there. Jos Vacano, Kenny's got that kind of slightly TV movie look. Brilliant. I mean, this film, when you saw the pictures, films don't have credit sequences now. They just go, the title just comes on, you go into the film. You know, this had that dun, 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 dun. Great Jerry Goldsmith score, and then you had the kind of, 3D sort of, with the shadowing on the graphics, and it just had Carlico, a Paul Verhoeven, and he said, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you've got the biggest star in the world. Oh, and when I came out of the pictures, I was just buzzing. I just thought, this is great. I went to see it, again, because I went to see a double bill of Die Hard, and it was sold out because Die Hard 2 was coming out, so I went to see it again on a night on my own. We sat amongst a lot of couples, which was a bit sad. But I've always loved this film. It's still one of my favourite sci-fi films. 130 minutes long. It's not bloated. Great summer movie. And that's my number one. You could argue there's, people say Robocop's better. Maybe Starship Troopers has got more satire. Maybe, Black Book or one of these other Dutch films. But this is the perfect combination of star and director to me. One of the sad things is they never made another film. This could have had a James Cameron type effect with Arnie. They were going to do a film about the Crusades. It was going to be $100 million budget. For whatever reason, it didn't happen. I think they were planning it in the 90s. There wasn't the appetite for those kind of period battle films. Then Gladiator came out, but by that point, Verhoeven's stock had gone down because, Hollow Man and so on. And Arnie wasn't the big draw that he was by then. The end of the 90s was the beginning of the decline of Arnie as the world's biggest box office star. It raises his last sort of biggish action hit. So Crusades remains one of the great unmade films. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Paul Verhoeven, fucking swords, violence. It would have been amazing, but it didn't happen. So sadly, they only made one film, but it's a brilliant film. Now I've waffled on for 26 minutes about Paul Verhoeven. That's longer than some other guys. But anyway, hope you enjoyed. That's my top 10 Paul Verhoeven films. Thank you very much, and see you again.